Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down for my impressions of Starfield. Finally, the wait is over. We can completely open up on this game. No longer will I have to censor myself while covering Starfield. You won't have to analyze my every word and facial expression to see how I'm feeling about Starfield. We can just talk about the game nice and open here today, as I've put 70 hours into the game over the last 2 weeks. With one of those weeks, I was balancing 3 other reviews on top of it, as you've seen over on Retro Rebound and here on Mr. Matty. The reviews have gradually poured out. So if that's any gauge as to how much I throw myself at Starfield, sleep schedule will be damned. I wanted to clock the hours and I was having a good time doing so. Now, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed impressions, 70 hours. That's really weird. How can you not have your final say on Starfield after 70 hours with it? This game has so much content to it, so many storylines, so many distractions that, quite frankly, I don't feel like I've seen enough to put a final say behind it. If I were to put my take into a nutshell right now on Starfield and expand upon it for a very long time, I'd say this. Starfield is a game that I really like. It's great most of the time, but compared to Fallout or Elder Scrolls and how I feel about those games, I can't say right now I love Starfield. Now, I could see myself falling in love with Starfield, but as it stands right now, there's too many snags and gaps in the experience for me to confidently say, yo, I love this. This is the BGS experience. Now, of course, modding will do its thing. Of course, expansions will do their thing. These games are continuously updated, so things may change, and that's why I'm not putting my final say on it until I've finished all of the main faction storylines. As it stands right now, with 70 hours in the game, I've finished the main story for Starfield. I've done a lot of exploring, a lot of side quests. I've only done a little bit of the UC Vanguard faction quest line, and I'm still waiting on things like the Ryujin Industries quest line. I'm waiting on the Crimson Fleet quest line. I've only done 1 loyalty mission, and so on and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. With that said, I don't want you to conflate my lack of love currently with a dislike for the game. Starfield is mostly fantastic in my eyes, but I can't confidently say in a BGS game where I feel their faction storylines define a lot of my love for them that I really do love this game without seeing all of those through. There are legitimate critiques I have of the game, and you're going to hear a lot of them to the point you may think I don't like it. But I want to make it clear up front before I get very critical that I do really enjoy Starfield, because I know this video is going to be long, and I know the internet's attention span a bit too well at this point. There is a lot of content here, and this is undoubtedly Bethesda's biggest game and their most ambitious. I can say that confidently, because while Starfield is a game that I can't say I love at this moment in time, you can see that all the years of building various different games from Bethesda Game Studios have been poured into this one here. Whether it be the awe-inspiring scale of Daggerfall, the amount of time spent talking with characters reminded me of Morrowind, the dark, somber tone of Fallout is deeply rooted in Starfield. The powers of Skyrim are here. The improved shooting and building is taken from Fallout 4 and then improved upon further. The expansive, unbelievable scale at the time of Oblivion feels very real here in Starfield, and yes, even lessons learned from 76's Chasing Ghosts storyline are applied well here. Starfield doesn't come without its flaws, some bigger than others, but I can say at the very least that this is an inspired effort from Bethesda Game Studios. Is it my favorite game from them? Currently, no, but after some time, I can say I'm very pleased with the game, and it's by no stretch of the imagination a flop. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are new here and you're into Starfield, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. We have a lot more coverage on the way. And with that, let's begin with the main story. What? What do you mean, Matty? Okay, hold the phone, all right? The start of my Starfield experience was very hit and miss, scarily so, and I'll expand upon that in a little. But around the 20-hour mark, I was kind of disappointed in Starfield. I'm like, I am not having as much fun as I thought I was, until I played this main story. And then it really dramatically flipped the script for me, where I started to feel the love kicking in here. Ladies and gentlemen, the intro scared me, okay? There's no step out moment, really. The kickstart felt relatively uninspired, and there were so many tutorials holding my hand, even hours deep into the game. Hell, even stepping out of the cave in Skyrim, it may not match Fallout 3 when it comes to the view, but that feeling of being able to go anywhere is unmatched, and it's not there in Starfield, which is the most expansive Bethesda Game Studios game. That's because Starfield is played a particular way. You see, that's not common for Bethesda Game Studios games. Let's use the step-out moment of Fallout 3 as a perfect example. When you exit Vault 101, you could go to the Springvale Elementary School, you could go to Megaton, you could go straight to the Washington Monument. It's all laid out before you, and it's up to you how you want to explore the map, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. With Starfield, the biggest issue with it, if you're a Bethesda Game Studios veteran, but not issue if you're new to these types of games, is there is a strong sense of direction. Starfield doesn't start to make sense or feel cohesive, or you don't start to get any of it until you start doing the main story. The main story not only brings all these ideas aligned properly, but it also serves as the beautiful tour guide as you stop from location to location. It's there your quest log is going to begin to fill up, and it gives you a sense of purpose and direction and guides you towards the content that otherwise you'd be wandering around trying to find. And depending how you look at it, this could be a flaw of the game, or it could actually be a really good thing about the game. The reason I look at it more as a flaw is any game prior from Bethesda Game Studios, yes, even Fallout 76, I don't need to be told to go anywhere or do anything. I just go. But in Starfield, there is a right way of doing things. That's not the case for their older games. I anticipated Starfield's story to be an uplifting tale of humanity's journey into the stars, but after getting more intimate with the game's lore and characters, its tone is more akin to Fallout than Elder Scrolls if you're looking for some type of familiar comparison from their past library. The universe of Starfield is rich with bloody wars, experiments to uncover, and hidden truths buried within the depths of the Blackest Sea. One such mystery is your character chasing down artifacts across the universe alongside Constellation. The mystery of what's out there and where these artifacts actually come from drives absolutely Bethesda Game Studios' best main story yet. Now, I know. Oh, hold on. Okay. Yeah, the bar is not high at all. I love Fallout 3's main story. I think that's legitimately great. But I know stuff like Fallout 4 wasn't really convincing to people, where Bethesda was really trying to tell a genuinely great main story. And when you fire up Skyrim, it's not what you're playing it for, right? It's about the adventure, the exploration. But this is different, y'all. It's not just good for Bethesda Game Studio standards. Like, it's a legitimately great main story that lifts up the entire experience through and through. Not just in its mystery-driven plot and how it constantly kept me on edge, but choices matter, with twists and turns throughout the entire tale, alongside some of their best mission work to date. It's not going to be like Skyrim, where I play it once and never again since 2011. And when you wrap that in with a completely unique New Game Plus take, which I'm not going to spoil for you, and that's what made me start to fall in love with Starfield. Now, keep in mind, like, I'm not even showing you all the main story gameplay. Like, that's how protective I'm feeling about it. It's like, you just gotta see it for yourself, because I know the expectations are low, and Bethesda has a chance to really surprise you here. Now, for those of you who have played Bethesda Game Studios games before, that's not typically your average recommendation for any of their games, right? That's because the questing drives Starfield more than the exploration. And that is a shame, because with 1,000 planets, I think Bethesda failed to convince me that that experiment was worth it. Obviously, you know how the likes of Fallout and Elder Scrolls nowadays are defined by seeing something in the distance, wandering to it, maybe getting distracted along the way. The stories of these games oftentimes aren't the quests, but how you approached its very dense maps. Starfield has almost been none of that in my experience. I can't even think of a time that I wandered off the beaten path or saw something in the distance that pulled me away from my current objective. The problem with that is I didn't happen upon any cool stories within locations. That's the water cooler moment of these games, and I feel like some of that magic is a bit gone here. Instead of wandering, the quests guide the content. While the quests in this game are mostly fantastic with choice to boot, I could never shake the feeling that I wish things were just a little bit different. Now, planets are basically broken up into zones, so if you want to go from the Mars Mech Factory to Cydonia, you don't just jog there. You're going to open your map and land on another spot across the planet. So not only is the exploration on foot kind of missing there, but the seamlessness of its environments as you wander from place to place, with that being gone, and it's always interrupted by opening menus and navigating maps. You get used to the flow, but I describe it as a messy bedroom where you know where everything is within the mess, but it's still pretty damn messy. Landing on your 500th planet and seeing yet another civilian outpost or abandoned lab or another piece of procedurally generated content starts to feel more and more like a letdown, and still with a lot of shooting galleries to boot, where areas like the Mars Mech Factory that I mentioned earlier felt completely underwhelming and reminded me of some of the Raider outposts from Fallout 4. You can easily tell when a planet is barren and to avoid it, but oftentimes I would just risk it and say, oh, that's a little bit of a different name from what I've seen before with these kind of generic other locations. what is that? Let me check it out. And oftentimes, I was just like, man, why did I do that? I should have just followed the quest path. I shouldn't have bothered exploring. And I hate that I feel that way. Now, with these planets being so big and vast, even with a fully upgraded boost pack, I still feel the game actually might need vehicles. The stretches of exploration are wide, vast, relatively empty, and despite being far prettier than any Bethesda Game Studios game, I take an uglier game that's more full of places to see and not lacking the typical, oh, what's that distractions of a BGS game. All of you know I'm a BGS purist. The fact that I'm asking for vehicles should tell you the stretches of land you're gonna go through without anything to see. Now, some are going to dig this. It's not like an awful component of the game. The vast isolation of this universe, set of universes, is something special in Starfield. And if you like, say, No Man's Sky, this is going to be right up your alley. And part of it was drummed up in my head, if you will. Like, the space exploration, to me, felt like a bit of a letdown, because what would happen is you'd sometimes feel like the space sections were nothing more than interactive menus where you'd bring up your scanner, look around and go, okay, what planet am I zipping to next? You wouldn't fly around and look and see like, oh, wait, what's in the middle of these asteroids here? Occasionally you'll come into a system and you'll see, oh, there's a big ship out here. What's that? And those moments of interaction can be some of the very best in Starfield. When you have that needle in a haystack moment, oh, it's amazing. Like the little interactions and stuff, that it feels so good, and it makes you want more of that. So you learn the rules of the game eventually, right? This is a new IP, and I checked myself. I went, okay, Matty, this isn't Fallout, this isn't Elder Scrolls, this is Starfield. If the quests guide the content, then so be it. Let's drop on a planet and find some quests. And you start to learn some of the double-edged sword of Starfield's quests, as this can be the greatest strength or at times weakness of the game. So when you're in the thick of the main quest or some faction storyline, Starfield's quests are some of the very best that I feel Bethesda has made in a long time. So much so that some of my complaints of the game were starting to fade, and I was really just loving the quests. The Vanguard storyline is one example I can throw out there, is a particularly gripping one that caught me off guard in a lot of ways because of its surprisingly dense lore buried beneath it. It's very creepy, creature-like storyline, and really let me start to fall in love with the game's quest, because choices here, y'all. It's not spiderwebbing. Don't go in expecting completely dramatic changes in the storyline. But I feel like Bethesda did listen to the feedback after Fallout 4, and they incorporated in Far Harbor, and they kind of took that and expand upon it. There are choices on how things turn out. Characters live and die. Some quest rewards vary up. This is much more choice-driven than any of their past games. Not only that, but much like I said with the main story, the mission variety I found to be way more improved. Like seriously, when I saw Bethesda busting out a stealth mission as a creature was stalking me around an abandoned facility on a rainy night in the creation engine, and actually worked kind of well, I knew that they had achieved something particularly great with this game. Companions are going to comment on everything and feel more involved than ever, which is a really nice touch here. So they're not just tailing you in combat, but have a lot to say throughout your adventure. The quest chains in Starfield that just keep going and going and going and mount up. The stakes feel like they grow higher and higher, and really keep you invested, where some of them, man, are just so good. Like, I think back to the times of Oblivion where you did the Dark Brotherhood quest line, you're like, man, that was good stuff. And I didn't really walk away from many quests in Starfield feeling disappointed. It's just that you're pursuing the content in a new way. Whereas in Fallout and Elder Scrolls, you kind of just wander and bump into it and find quests and people, and then you end up leading to the next objective and the next objective. With Starfield, you find the people very easily, whether it be Neon, Oculus City, or you find them in New Atlantis, and then they lead you to a variety of star systems that'll lead you to planets that may have pockets of civilization or more quests to find, and that's how the ball gets rolling. Eventually, your quest log is going to be overwhelmingly full. Like, the fact that I have 70 hours in the game and I'm sitting here like, yo, I still have a bonkers quest log with major content, not just side stuff, major content still there. This is easily, I could see myself throwing like 200 hours into the game once it's all said and done. And that's not even accounting for when modding comes in. But looking at the base game, it's just a staggering amount of content, and a lot of that main meat is really good quest stuff. However, some side quests are very much predictably simple due to their framework. Talk to person A, run to person B, either fight or persuade them, then run back to person A, and the quest is complete. At first, I didn't catch on to this, but as I sunk more time into the game, I thought to myself with quest after quest, that could have actually been a little bit more, is when I realized it started to become a consistent issue. At first, it's not, but you'll start to notice it time in, time out. And of course, when you accept that the quests guide the content, that will put more pressure on them to actually be good, which is why I don't overlook them as easily as maybe past Bethesda Game Studios games. Now, I did mention there's a lot of choice here, but one thing that just, oh man, it's just such a missed opportunity, because I'll explain why. There's so much dialogue in this game. It's nutty. They could have absolutely done it. They don't use the backgrounds. They don't use the traits nearly enough. It feels more like I'm picking a class in Oblivion. If you look at it that way, you'll be more accepting of it, but they don't use this stuff nearly enough, and it just hurts, because there could be alternative solutions, but a lot of it's just flavor text. Sometimes you see it pop up, and when you do, I'm like, I'm picking that dialogue option no matter what the outcome is, because I don't see it enough. It's so exceedingly rare in my experience thus far, and it hurts, man, because I know they could use it so much more. That's because things are often shoehorned into the persuasion minigame, which is pretty fun, don't get me wrong. There's a point counter at the bottom of the screen, and the goal is to fill that out. So if a character needs 5 points to be convinced of something, you'll have to select particular dialogue options that'll work your way up to that point mark. Now, some easier ones that'll likely have a high chance of convincing this person might be worth a point or two, but the more high-risk stuff in the orange and red will be higher points, but more difficult to get your point across. And if you fail, then you're going to be walled out of convincing them again. It works well, but there's so many times I'm thinking to myself, this is so much more writing and voice acting that could have easily been put towards skill checks, things that made my playthroughs feel more unique beyond the moral choices that were made. It's almost like Bethesda got way too carried away with this system, because the shortage of dialogue wasn't the issue. Like, not at all. In this game, I spent seriously more time chatting people up probably than taking out my gun and shooting up, which is crazy to think about with the last 2 BGS games, but there is no shortage of dialogue here. And that's one of the bright spots of the game. I was spending time finding NPCs and just asking them about their time on this planet, their companies they've worked for, just getting a feel for the world. All of the dialogue feels fruitful, because if you're invested in the lore like I am, you're like, yo, this is all great stuff. So that's enough about questing and exploration and stuff. For the most part, quests are really good. Exploration is a little more hit and miss than I'd like. Let's get into tech for a little bit, because Bethesda did make, Creation Engine 2. They really overhauled stuff to make this game work. So was it worth it? Did it pay off? My frame rate was steady throughout the entire experience. Otherwise, I really genuinely, I'm not a 30 FPS defender at all, but I really didn't notice it at all. Like, I gotta say, for all the slander Todd Howard gets about like hyperbole, oh, he said this and it wasn't true, tell me sweet little lies, I think he was actually kind of on the money, saying like, you don't really think about the frame rate. Like, it is 30 frames, but it plays smooth. I just never cared or thought about it. I only noticed 2 times when I was landing on a planet, oh, it stuttered there a little bit. That was strange, but otherwise the game ran really well. Now, there's a ton of loading screens. That's something you're going to notice, especially when you get to Neon. Oh, good Lord, man. It's like every 5 steps, every building you go into, every quest you do, it breaks up the flow of what is an otherwise really cool planet, and kind of made it my least favorite to go to, because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to just constantly get broken out of the experience here. I'm okay with load screens, just you'll see. It's a lot. Facial animations are very much Oblivion here. Eyebrow bumps and eyes darting everywhere galore. It's good for BGS fans, but not necessarily the industry standard. But with how much dialogue there is, I personally didn't care that the facial animations weren't the best. Now, the environments look extremely good. Whether it's the vast diversity of planets you'll be landing on, or when you get up close in one of the interiors. In particular, I was a big fan of the interior decoration that made good use of the extra headroom to clutter the environments with stuff. It's not like in Fallout 4 where you hover over a cursor on a locker and loot everything in there automatically through a menu. You have to look at every particular item in Starfield, and that just draws the attention to the detail in its world. The character models, however, vary in quality. They look okay for the most part, but some just look really bad, and the weapons, armor, and spacesuits otherwise look really good. So it's a pretty mixed palette on the visuals level. It's definitely Bethesda Game Studios' best looking game yet, especially when you're in the deep vastness of space. There are some parts that just legitimately look great, but it's an up and down ride there as well, visually speaking. Now, what about bugs? Bugthesda, did they do it again? I gotta say, my experience here was a little topsy-turvy. As I first started my review, I was like, oh boy, yeah, it's buggy. Then patch 1.7 came in. Then the day one patch came in, and gradually things started to disappear. My two biggest issues with the game were these. Number one, the bald bug glitch, I like to call it. People would just show up being bald. Everyone was bald. Even if they were supposed to have hair, they were bald. When you were having emotional moments and people's hair are just flickering out of place and they're bald, just takes you right out of it, man. Now, I'm saying that as someone who experienced it then, based off what I've communicated with Bethesda, like, yo, I was like, this is really bad. You got to get rid of this if you can. They are saying it's already patched out, so hopefully you don't run into it, but I'm accounting for it anyway because it was distracting when it happened. What I typically do is close out my app, reset, and eventually it would work again. There are a few waypoint bugs for quests. There was one that involved the UC Vanguard where it would like tell me, oh, they're here underwater, and I'd actually have to go to an elevator in a building or something like that. It was really strange. There were a few of those, but again, that's one of the things that started to fade out. Initially, it was a lot, and then it kind of disappeared, so that may have just been a product of the review process. And the other bug, if you will, is that sometimes characters don't turn to face you in dialogue. So they'll just be talking to you kind of like this the whole time. And I'm like, yo, just friggin' look at me, dude. I want to just grab them by the shoulders, just rotate, face me head on. That's something you're going to also recognize with the game. But in the terms of quest failing and whatnot, it's definitely better. I'm always hesitant with these games to be like, yep, we're good, because I see the bug montages online, but this is one of those games where I gotta say, on console, what I've played through 70 hours felt relatively bug-free and polished up, which I'm happy to see, because hopefully the conversation can center on the game and what's right and wrong with it rather than Bugthesda again. Now on to the gunplay, which feels better than Fallout 4 for sure, and when you incorporate zero gravity elements, it elevates it, like floating around an abandoned casino or floating across the surface of a planet while fighting. I feel like gravity is the main combat influencer here. Otherwise, things like status effects that apply when you land on planets, I never really thought much of, and I found that to be a bummer. I wasn't like changing out my spacesuit or something like, say, Tears of the Kingdom. You're changing your outfit depending on what planet you're on, which I know that's more survival-y, more hardcore. Maybe they do something after launch with that, but it felt like a missed opportunity because gravity really is the only, I think, noteworthy, impactful part of these planets when it comes to combat and exploration. And most times I was hoping that planets were zero gravity because, as I mentioned, we got some big stretches of land here, and if I could just boost pack my way across, that would be great. The AI in combat mostly sucks. This would probably fall under the bug category, but I wanted to put it in the gameplay section. This is just, oh my God, like some of them just don't work. And it just, when you improve the gunplay, but the enemies attacking you are not a threat, it really takes you out of things. It just does, man. And I can't shake off how bad of a time I had with the combat AI. Again, this is one of those things, patch after patch, it did improve. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, like they're flanking me and whatnot, but shoot me, please, at least. Meanwhile, the ship combat is where it is the most refreshing and best feeling part of Starfield. Managing your ship's power, where it goes to engines for speed, shields for protection, or your arsenal, all at your fingertips for increased firepower. The dogfights are easily this game's highlights. Like, I just laugh at how horses felt in Skyrim, and then I look at this and I'm like, this is amazing how good the ship combat feels. I really revel in any time I can get into a dogfight in this game, which isn't uncommon. Now, most of my deaths happened in space. I'll say that. When I was on foot, I was doing all right. But when I was in space, there's a challenge there. Like when you're getting mowed down, it's like, whoa, wait, that was kind of tough there. And I gotta say, I like that because it makes you go back to the drawing board and get into shipbuilding. So let's talk about that, shall we? Is it Fallout 4 again? Did they focus too much on the building and the crafting? No, actually, this is all the way to the side. I will say you probably want to get into spaceship crafting. It is a little overwhelming, but Bethesda was right on the money. This is later game stuff. I've barely touched outpost management. I've messed around enough when it comes to the spaceship crafting to know what I'm doing, but it's intimidating because I wasn't building from scratch. I was just upgrading what was there. Let's talk about that building, shall we? So Starfield may be one of the lesser beginner-friendly BGS games, which likely explains the massive amount of tutorials I talked about. Even a seasoned vet, if you will, like myself, was intimidated by this game's shipbuilding, but this aspect is addicting and gratifying. Now, the gratification not only comes from the increases of speed and damage, but also how the interior of your ships changes depending on the parts you use, which vary across different starship manufacturers. This is why I say Starfield's visuals are a very uneven experience. There were times I was on New Atlantis, I'm like, why does this stretch of the horizon look kind of eh? But wait, when I get into this cockpit, like the details, the little buttons, the little lights, oh man, it's beautiful. And it's completely different because it's coming from a different manufacturer. Like that's cool attention to detail there, but it's just not always on that level across the board. But still, it made the spaceship crafting so worthwhile because it's not just, oh, look, I can do different things. It's when you're walking around, like this looks like a totally different place now. It also made me appreciate the game's economy as I wasn't super rich throughout my time in Starfield in 70 hours and had to make calculated decisions on what I sold and what I bought to upgrade my ship. Now, outposts, as I said, are completely optional, unlike how it was said to be in Fallout 4. I mean, you can pretty much hook up one outpost as a place for all the homies to go chill at, send some companions there, call it a day. Crafting is perk driven, just like outposts and shipbuilding, thus it likely won't be your first pick when leveling up, and this creates a pretty steady power curve where sprinting to power weapons isn't really an option thanks to level gated systems across the galaxy. Now, with that in mind, there is weapon crafting. This stuff is also perk driven. The named weapon finds are few and far between here, which just feels like a missed opportunity, but I was not surprised with how much procedural content is here. It just felt like, yeah, of course you're not going to load me up with tons of crazy weapons that I've only found unique to this quest giver, and most of them are a little underwhelming. Like I'm usually building and crafting way better stuff, so it's continuously underwhelming. I hate that BGS has walked away from that because I don't like Skyrim is the perfect rare weapon and armor game. Perfect. They had it so good. And then Fallout 4, they're like, what if we just watered that down with legendary weapons? And they just ran with it. And it's here in Starfield. So there are named weapons. You're going to get unique ones for quests, but some of them visually aren't diverse. They're just named. And so it just, yeah, it feels like a palette swap at times in that regard. Still leveling up. I'm at level 30 something right now, and I don't feel entirely OP, which is really nice. In fact, the leveling by doing in this game, when you add in New Game Plus, makes it where like it's going to take time to become that godlike figure, which I think could work to the game's favor. I like that there was a steady challenge when I was in space, that there was a sense of danger when the AI worked on ground. It can be a pretty tough game, which I really enjoyed. This does complicate some things because there are so many gun types and so many ammo types that sometimes your brain will shut off as you're just looting little pockets of ammo. But as you settle into a weapon, you're going to hang with it for a long while. It's not like Borderlands where everyone's spitting out loot, but I just haven't found that Overseer's Guardian like in Fallout 4 where I'm like, that's my gun. That's my gun. Or, you know, in Skyrim, the Mace of Molag Bal. You know, I have yet to find that really unique looking weapon that does something that no one else in the game has. The last component of my impressions here is sound. I got to talk about the music and I got to talk about the sound in space, because the sounds that you'll hear in space will change if you're having the camera on the interior versus your camera on the exterior. It's totally Star Wars on that front. But the music, I got to highlight the music. I'm a big music elevates my game type of dude. And ladies and gentlemen, this soundtrack may be Bethesda's best. And I know that's saying a lot. I love Fallout soundtrack. I love Elder Scrolls. I know. But off the rip, there's so many good tracks. Like Neon speaks for itself, man. It's so good. Just the Einons are a classic in the making right now. This is a inspired effort here. And that's kind of the tale of the tape. Despite some of the flaws that I've pointed out here, Starfield has been so far totally addicting and gripping for me. And I can't step away from it. Even with my issues with exploration, even with my issues in quest pacing, ladies and gentlemen, this is a really good time. That's why I say I really like it. I can't say I love it now, but I could see myself falling in love with it. I hope people got deep enough to hear all that, because my impressions and reviews are always a story that's kind of told. My story of my experience. That's what all these reviews and impressions are at the end of the day. And I know some people are going to hear the critiques up front and go, oh, he hates it. It's an awful game. There it is. This is a great game that I really do enjoy, and I'm going to continue to play. For me, as a BGS fan, I'm absolutely pleased to see ambitious BGS back. I'm having trouble shaking that exploration, but the questing almost makes up for it entirely, where I could see this being in the Game of the Year conversation, but it's not as automatic as something like Octopath Traveler 2 was, or Baldur's Gate 3 was for me, where I'm like, yeah, get in there, get in line, that you're in the list. Starfield is going to work its way up and crawl its way in probably. Where it lands, I'll let you know in the final review. But these are the impressions. This is how I'm feeling. I've had it all bottled up for a while. I've had a lot to say, but I'm looking forward to seeing the discourse on the game, strictly because I think it's going to be all over the place. I'm just guessing now, as someone who's in a vacuum, haven't talked to many reviewers about it too much. I feel like some people are really going to love Starfield, and I feel like some people are really going to be like, this was a miss. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on Starfield. The wait is almost over. I hope you all have an absolute blast with the game. I know for the most part, I definitely have. And we'll talk more about that with tip videos and whatnot. So we'll get into that, ladies and gentlemen. But until then, I'll see you in the final review for Starfield. And with that, take great care of yourselves. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the heck out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.